want to preface this video with a few words or sentences because the subject matter is fairly unique. Now, what you're about to hear are excerpts from a discussion that took place on I believe, TYT, that is Old Turk's affiliated channel, between some gentleman whose name escapes me now. He wasn't really the relevant bit, and an Irish woman named Angela Nagle, who wrote a short book called Kill the Normies, or Normies Must Die. Kill the Normies, I believe. Now, I normally wouldn't talk about these issues, but what I thought was interesting, and what could be evinced from this conversation, was that it was unusually reflective on the part of two people that are really on the far left. I believe Nagle herself says, and I'll be linking to these videos, the full-length videos in the low bar. I believe Nagle, the woman, the Irish woman, states that she is effectively a socialist. But what characterizes these conversations, and they're rather lengthy, but I think it's necessary that there's so much they talk about, and I think it's important that you get a hold of at least the gist and a good chunk of it. What's unusual about these conversations, it seemed to embody a kind of self-reflection that is almost absent in contemporary left-wing politics. Now, I think I should say now, and it's pretty obvious for those of you who followed me for a while, but I'm not on the right, I'm not on the left, despite people willing to classify me as both. I don't really like ideology because I do have this obsession with objective truth, and ideology just doesn't have an interest in that. Ideology is all about brainwashing and trying to sway people's minds, not necessarily through good argumentation, but through their hearts. I'm not a big fan of emotions or hearts, so I'm not really on the right. On the other hand, the main reason I don't like the left is because of its systematic suppression of scientific data, facts, and information, because in large measure they've been fearful of promoting certain things. That's definitely not my MO. I think we need to get the information out there and deal with it accordingly. And what I thought, as I said, was interesting about this conversation was precisely that Angela Nagle said, well, yeah, we can't, that is they on the left, not me, we cannot keep on ignoring certain data points or just facts, pretending they don't exist and not acknowledging them. So I want to first get that out there. I want you to, if you're going to listen to the video, listen to this exchange there too. In one instance, she kind of briefly talks about MGTOW and the manosphere. In another instance, she talks about the failure of sort of multiculturalism and cosmopolitanism and why the left needs to come up with solutions. So have a listen, and I will be reflecting on what she said further after you're done.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the ideas that they discuss, which are just off the table everywhere else, they can't be discussed in academia. They can't be discussed, anywhere in polite society, would be things like, and this is a factor that I think has really created, has fueled the alt-right, possibly more than anything else, is that patterns in America in particular, where there's very high divorce, where there's a lot of sexual choice, as a result, lower levels of monogamy and that kind of thing. One of the things that it has produced is a kind of sexual hierarchy among men. This actually does bear out in the figures, like where smaller numbers of men are having more sexual partners, and then there's a larger number at the bottom who are having none or very few. And so a lot of the discussion about this in various kind of like red pill and various forums like that has been about how to deal with like being a beta male, like not being at the bottom of the pile. And some of them have gone into like men going their own way, which is the separatist men's movement. Some of them have gone into kind of the pickup artist thing, which has this kind of social Darwinian thing about like how to trick women into liking you.
Yeah.
But once again, though, the thing that they're starting off with is correct. Like, they're observing a pattern and they're being told you're not supposed to observe it, So like, what's our answer to that? What's our alternative to that? That's what we have to be discussing.
Right.
How do we analyze the same phenomenon? But don't just say the phenomenon isn't there or you can't discuss it.
No, it's true, because now what you have is, in the aftermath of all of those invasions, you have Islamist massacres happening in the West.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to be able to continue to make the case for the immigration patterns we have, while those are going on and while people are scared and panicking, you need to have people of the kind of stature or whatever of the caliber of Hitchens and his kind of milieu, his peers, who are able to argue for the idea of a cosmopolitan, secular kind of society being this kind of beautiful vision of the future that was attractive to people, and it really was, and that's such a short time ago. But now, these things are happening, and people are questioning immigration, and they're thinking about nationalism and national borders and what it all means, and there really isn't any convincing voice there to argue for those things. I mean, for example, on the left, if you say, okay, I'm in favor of internationalism, I'm in favor of cosmopolitanism, and I'm in favor of the melting pot, you would probably get called out for that, because they would say the melting pot is wrong because it suggests that people should blend into a normative culture. So then you say, okay, right, so we can't have a normative culture, we can't have a melting pot, and so what are we arguing for here? What is our vision of the future that is going to compete with the visions that the right are coming out with? And where is it? I mean, I don't see it.
Or what is our vision of the future that is going to address this atomized disillusionment that so many people feel? And I think a lot of that does stem from the fact that, the melting pot maybe isn't working in the way that people might have envisioned years ago. I mean, there isn't, in parts of the country, a lot of like cross-cultural pollination. People do kind of insulate themselves in their own cultural cohort, which is, not necessarily wrong, but it does lead to a sort of societal disunion that I think breeds a lot of social problems.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's also in the context, as you say, of that atomization and the total breakdown of any sense of belonging that gives people's lives meaning, and this is, you cannot have a society based on this, and this is not me arguing for the right. I'm saying, if we are going to have something robust enough that it can challenge the right, we have to be able to speak openly and earnestly about, we have to be able to actually discuss these things and not be terrified that if you say something wrong, you will get sort of blasted into outer space for it,
Yeah, and I think another reason why you don't have a lot of people out in public making the case for internationalism and cosmopolitanism is because international, cosmopolitan, like supranational institutions have failed. I mean, look at the European Union. I mean, look at the discontent that supranational body has bred. Look at these international trade deals like NAFTA and the TPP, which Trump capitalized on to make a political argument. I mean, look at just international corporations, which seem to not have the interests of the common person in mind. I mean, maybe there's a way to make an argument for internationalism and cosmopolitanism that incorporates a critique of those bodies, and there most assuredly is. But I think in the popular conception, internationalism is almost synonymous now with these kind of like decadent ruling elite structures, which people don't want to associate with anymore.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and this is the context. I think one of the things, so my book was very much about the online culture wars, so it did focus on the kind of minutiae of little subcultures and things like that. But I generally think, because that's what the book set out to do, but I think in general we should avoid just focusing on these things and instead see them as symptoms of much bigger, broader problems. which have to be solved, and solving them is not going to be something easy. I mean, I think I think the only way that they could be solved is for some kind of movement that doesn't really exist yet. I think the right will probably have, well, it is having a period of ascendancy and power, and its own flaws will become apparent, and something else will have to come after that. Like if you think of, I always give sort of like Irish parallels, but they are kind of interesting just to take something totally, to see a parallel from a completely different country and a different culture and so on. When I think of cosmopolitanism, I think of James Joyce. And, James Joyce was responding to a kind of the aftermath of what had been a very vibrant movement. So, right, you had like this cultural nationalist movement at the beginning of Irish independence, before and then after. And then, as always happens, like every intellectual movement, it seems to constantly go this way. It became insular. It became hegemonic. It attracted people who liked to be part of, who were maybe like very conformist in their thinking and so on, and it became completely stifling for people. Then after that, you had this wave of like cosmopolitan writers and stuff like that, and they felt like the Ireland that was created by the cultural nationalists became this totally stifling, insular, society in which, everyone sort of had to be a Catholic reactionary, and so in other words, like I do have faith that that the ideas that are ascendant right now, which are very much on the right, they will probably have a period of power, and then they will be replaced by something else. But what will they be replaced by? And the thing is, we have to have very serious conversations about what that will be. If you look at the demographic patterns that we have now, I mean, they would always point out that these kind of that Western societies are going to change profoundly as a result of the demographic patterns, and that's true. But so we have to say, why? What is that going to look like? What would be? What kind of society do we want to build? That will be able to be pluralistic and kind of universalist at the same time. All those things.
So it should be clear to everyone who listen to that these people are definitely ideologically on the left. They make no secret of that. But what's interesting here, as I said, is that they actually seem reasonably reflective. And they point out, and this is in other sections of the conversation, you'd have to listen to the whole talk, which I would encourage you to do so, that the alt-right and various, because that's what the book is essentially about, based on my limited understanding of it, that, pardon me, the alt-right and many of these factions that have emerged in recent years are sort of a response to this atomized state society finds it in. They acknowledge, obviously, as you heard, that in some sense multiculturalism isn't working. People are shutting themselves in or into different groups. Now, I would say that it's good that they're raising these questions. If I obviously don't subscribe to left-wing ideology any more than I do to right-wing, but I don't think they're going to find solutions in conventional left-wing thinking. Particularly, as is pointed out in the discussion, due to the fact that the reason why I'm posting this and even making a conversation out of it is because you never hear this kind of discussion. There is no discussion on the left. Everything is just a shutdown. Everything is, as they point out, you can't sit at my lunch table if you disagree with me. Now, everything suffers from echo chambers and infighting. And apparently when she brought up certain points, she was called a far righter, even though she's an avowed socialist. But I don't think the discussion is going to be forthcoming. More importantly, I don't think the left can come up with solutions. Now, for one, what my big issue with the left, biggest issue, is they are science deniers when it's convenient to them. The alt-right are science deniers as well when it's convenient to them. It's just that overall, to the extent that the alt-right employs science at all, or the right wing, they're more inclined to make use of it, and it tends to be more accurate, or at least map onto reality. Whereas the left tends to practice outright denialism. If you're a left-wing ideologue, like these people are, what do? Well, I'm taking no real side here, at least in the battles of specific ideology, because my point of view, as I said, is always in ascertaining the truth as much as one can, and then maybe making some sort of game plan out of that, as non-attached to ideology as possible. That is a very difficult proposition. Human beings taint things with their desires and wishes. And so I can't really say I have a stake in this. I could say that, for example, if the right in general became very anti-science, I would not have very little association with it. I'm interested in getting to the bottom of things. And I think, ideally, it's my vision, I suppose, it's my ideology, we all should. But that's not the way people work. So as reflective as these people are, yes, it's interesting, but they're obviously trying to sway the masses. But here's the key thing. Clearly, the issues of multiculturalism, the failure of the cosmopolitan, male reproductive disenfranchisement, Islamism, and I think Angela Nagel attempts to sort of circumvent the issue, but obviously she's indirectly referring to things like the JQ, things that are quote unquote taboo that you never speak of. That's reasonably taboo. So there are hosts of them. That at some point in time, things become so blatantly obvious, right, that you have to make mention of them. Denying them is, denying the elephant in the room. I mean, imagine if a massive pachyderm just walked up to you. You're centimeters away from its massive trunk. It could stomp you in the blink of an eye. Well, you're going to pay attention. So I think this conversation and the fact that this book was even published, and I actually ordered the book, I'm probably going to read it just because I'm curious, really shows that things are coming to a head rather rapidly. When left-wing ideologues are willing to have conversations about things like this and say, look, we can't keep on ignoring it. Yes, the demographics are changing. What are we going to do about that? Now, I don't know what their game plan is, because there's a lot of evidence, most of it anecdotal, unfortunately, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that suggests that these multi-ethnic societies, on average, assuming they're not high IQ and there aren't too many of them, they're sort of niche ones like Silicon Valley and others, tend not to work particularly well, and there's always a lot of tension. She's right. They need to make an argument for what could be optimal or what could be done about that. You look at the various communities that have come to settle the UK in recent decades, since about the time of Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech, and I think you can see that they've isolated themselves. They're locked away. And he points this out. The guy the guy's having a conversation with her. This really is a turning point. Now, I don't think anyone really has a particularly good answer to these problems. And one possibility, concession, I think that we all need to make on occasion, is there might not be a solution. And by solution, I mean a solution that's satisfactory to everybody. There's always some kind of solution. It's just that it tends to make certain people unhappy. And in certain types of solutions, lots of people die. So I don't really see even a good solution here. The right is, well, there's so many factions, as they point out, within the right. But I don't think the alt-right's going to die down. And I don't think the left is going to acknowledge certain things. in particular because they're so insular, insulated, and just cut off from reality. And credit where it's due, at least she, despite her being a socialist, she recognizes that this is a big issue for the left. Because you can't keep on ignoring reality. Once reality hits you in the face and you just say, well, it's just the way it is, or people are not going to find that a satisfactory answer. People are not going to say, when there's a massive bomb that goes off in Schiphol airport in the Netherlands, and lots of people die, just an example. Well, everything's fine, multiculturalism, blah, blah, blah. People increasingly are tired of that. I think it's just a matter of time before non-aligned people will just end up, without formally declaring an alliance or a declaration of loyalty, will just group up with the right. Say, hey, you know what? I'm done with this. This has been too much. Time to move on. We need, quote-unquote, solutions, whatever those solutions might be. The casualty in all of this, as always, will be truth, nuance, and the ability to discern complications that just always arise in human interaction and behavior. And let me point out again, neither the right nor the left have the truth as a primary modus operandi. Both are seeking to sway minds. By swaying minds is just, it's obviously jargon for just brainwashing people. So whatever alliance or whatever sort of crossover I have with the right, it's really based on the fact that the left is anti-science and is not interested in promoting scientific information and data to the best of their ability. Although, given their current trajectory, I don't see that happening anytime soon. There are a few exceptions, people like Sam Harris who might concede certain things, but they're quite rare, I think. But I think, if anything, this video is an indication, or this conversation they had is an indication that things really have come pretty far if people on the left are willing to say there are a lot of problems here on the left, and we, that is they who represent the left, need to come up with solutions. Interesting to see how this is going to play out, because when reality is plain to see, the denialism simply won't work anymore. And the right, and specifically the alt-right, has the advantage in that they occasionally make use of scientific factoids when it suits them. And they're kind of relentless on certain issues. And ties into some male reproductive disenfranchisement. What is, she said, what is the left wing's answer to male reproductive disenfranchisement, except more? The society that was created has largely been due to, I would say, inexorable intellectual forces of modernity, in conjunction, obviously, with certain types of ideologies and interests in pushing things. But I don't think the left has a solution, and I don't really think the right has a solution. I think things are just going to continue along the way they have done. And as she pointed out, with regards to Irish nationalism, it became a very sort of stale, stultifying thing. I think this is going to happen even if the alt-right does become ascendant, and there's going to be fractiousness there too. You have people in the alt-right that can't stand Jared Taylor, for example, because he doesn't obsessively mention the JQ in every sentence. Okay, but generally speaking, he's a good speaker. He's approachable. You'd think he'd be a good representative of the quote-unquote alt-right. But anyway, just an example. This isn't going to end well, I think, because one important point, as I draw this video to an end, that they drive home, is there's no discussion anymore. I mean, can you think Andrea Dworkin had a discussion with William F. Buckley back in the day? It's interesting, to say the least. And that kind of conversation would take place. You'd never see that these days. Anyway, I'm of a mind to actually try to, if I can, I don't think, I don't know if she's well known, a journalist would come on my channel, being small and being part of the many repellent factions that she references in the book and elsewhere. But I would be interested in having a discussion with her, because I'd like to see what her so-called solutions are to some of these problems. At the very least, she brought some of these things up. And there'll be more to come in the future. Links below as usual. And if I'm still alive, I will check you out later. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.